So I'm gonna put this Tyler Cohen article in the chat.
Oh, Bloomberg.
Yeah.
Bloomberg opinion. Felix.
That's how you know it's good. Hey everybody. The reason you're hearing my voice this week is because Will Menaker has been captured and executed by patriots for the crime of adrenochrome harvesting. Menaker's assets have been seized and will be distributed to the bravest and most injured police officers in the States. The show has, in turn, been given to me, and as part of this new era of Chapo and this new era of patriotism and victory over the deep state, we're welcoming a returning guest, but also a duo that we have not had before. We are here with Derek Davison, returning champion, but also Patrick Wyman. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us on. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Seriously. So we have a reading series. One of the last things that Will left us before he was immediately renditioned. Are you guys familiar with Tyler Cohen?
Oh boy. Oh,
yeah.
Oh yeah. I got thoughts.
Yeah, Tyler Cohen. Well, first of all, the first way he gets you is by thinking his name is Tyler Cohen, but he's actually Irish. That's his first act of Yeah, no. If the W's in there, like,
well, that's the thing, isn't it? Cowan?
Yeah, it's Cowan.
Yeah, but you were saying Cohen.
No, I said Cowan.
All right, whatever.
Another thing I'm doing: gaslighting Matt. It's a new thing.
Really looking forward to the results.
You're insane. What are you looking forward to? Nothing will happen. There's no results. You're fucking crazy.
What?
You need to go to the hospital. No. So he is George Mason professor in economics, which is like, those guys are always awesome. The George Mason, it produces a certain type of mind because it's sort of the epicenter of Koch funding in right-wing economics and academia.
I really thought you were going with a different direction with it's the epicenter of Coke.
Yeah, I don't think they do Coke at George Mason. I don't think they do anything.
But let's think, I don't know, the overthrow of South American governments. I mean, there's a connection to be made.
Yeah, I don't know. I just maybe Nova's changed since the last time I was there, but I feel like do it. Like, I feel like the main thing you do there is like, yeah, you drink like Imperious Bastard IPA and then like try to buy a woman off the dark web.
Right.
I always think of George Mason as sort of like the party school answer to the University of Chicago.
That's exactly, yes.
Yeah.
If you're like too libertarian for Chicago economics department, you wind up at George Mason.
I mean, if you just like scroll through the Twitter accounts of the George Mason economics department, you're going to find some real shit in there. There's the guy who's very big into like homeschooling and free range children. There's the guy who's very into slavery was actually inefficient. Like you really get all of the best particular brands of right wing crazy. Like, that's all just there. And then they've got like a couple of really good economic historians, which is weird. So just gotta
free
fill it
range
out.
children, I tell you, that's the only way you're going to get the top dollar value in the market when you bring them to the town square at the end of the month. If they've been sitting in a cage, they're going to get all stringy. They're going to be underweight. You're not going to be able to get a decent price.
Yeah, I hate when I go to a restaurant and I can tell like the eggs I'm having are from a caged child. It's not as good. There was a guy for George Mason who like went to Venezuela and shot at protesters.
Chile? Oh no, that was Chile.
Oh yeah. My bad.
Yeah. No, he moved to Chile because Chile was like his. Obviously, that's the dream country. That's where their boys did all their beautiful work under Pinochet. And so he moved there to like start some sort of Bitcoin and slave trading company. And then when the anti-government protests started, he just drove out and just started shooting at them.
Yeah, this is the freshwater school for guys who listen to Rogan.
But I consider Cowan the alpha of George Mason, and Pat, you mentioned the slavery is an efficient guy. This is definitely an article about slavery. This is it's a piece of advice. It's a Bloomberg opinion, so you know it's good.
All the best opinions are.
Yeah, how not to fight modern day slavery. by Tyler Cowen.
Would it surprise you to me by ending it?
Yeah. So this is an article about a bill proposed by Josh Hawley, the Slave Free Business Certification Act of 2020, which it's basically like if there's slavery in your supply chain, like you have to be investigated, companies get penalized, blah blah blah. Like it's a perfect Hawley thing because it doesn't really go far enough. But it's enough for people who get paid for this sort of thing to be like, oh, the Howley's the populist Republican. But this utterly
because
terrifying.
he's against slavery.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very populist.
There's where the bar is right there.
Yeah. Well, Cowan,
the first sentence of this piece is really just like sets the table. I think.
Yeah,
and the fact that it continues after is something else.
Yeah, so it's okay. As the general principle, companies should cut off commercial relations with any known sources of slavery. Yet this law calls for mandatory corporate investigation and auditing, backed by CEO certification with significant penalties for noncompliance. The investigatory process is supposed to include interviews of both workers and management in the supply chain. Such a get tough approach has a superficial appeal. Yet placing an investigative burden on companies may not lead to better outcomes. Consider the hypothetical case of a U.S. retailer buying a shipment of seafood routed through Vietnam. It fears that some of the seafood may have come from Thailand, where there are credible reports of temporary slavery in the supply chain.
Well, I mean,
it's temporary.
Everybody dies eventually, so technically all slavery is temporary.
There's no slavery in perpetuity because we do not exist in perpetuity.
Yeah, temporary. I just didn't really know what to say there.
I guess like the argument is like, well, we just kind of kidnap them, and it's sort of like an extended prank show, and then we let them go again.
It's an apprenticeship. I mean, we
enslave them
temporarily. It's like the mandate system. Like we have to, give them some skills, and then we let them go, and they can do what they want.
The Irish Free State of slavery.
How does it find out if those reports are true? Yeah, how do you know if anything is true? What is
the McCardle?
Really?
That's Megan McCardle's music right there. Why do you know? Why do you know that's a chair? Is that really air you're breathing?
Asking its Vietnamese business partner, who may not even know the truth and might be reluctant to say if it did, is unlikely to resolve matters. Yeah, no, I mean, why ask anyone anything? It is unlikely that businesses, even larger and profitable ones, will be in a position to hire teams of investigative journalists for their international inputs. That's
not how you rank. Like, I love the idea that like the journalists are going to act as international OSHA.
Yeah, they're going to get Daily Beast people who recap Bill Maher on this.
They'll get credible, wonderful journalists. Whose companies all depend on ad dollars from the company that's hiring them. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, what I loved about this is like I instantly thought of Steven Donziger, the guy who represented the suits against ExxonMobil, and it's like, well, the large and profitable companies seem to have more than enough resources to dig through that guy's fucking garbage and ruin his life.
Yeah.
I don't know why they couldn't do this.
Yeah, how many money did they drop on destroying a guy whose crime was beating them in a lawsuit?
Yeah.
I mean, look, you can snap up. There's a lot of reporters who have rage quit their jobs recently. You could snap up Andrew Sullivan, Barry Weiss. I mean, really big names.
Yeah, a lot of people with a lot of deep investigative skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I love the idea of like Barry just like waddling around like a manufacturing plant in Shenzhen, just being like, "Hey, is this fun for you?" Like just seeing, like I don't know how she would even. I don't think she knows what work is, so she's starting out from like a real disadvantage anyway. But the idea of her interacting with other people, you know what? Make it a show. I'm not saying that this is a good idea, but I'm saying I do want to watch it.
What you're describing is like the 2020 equivalent of The Simple Life, but with Barry Weiss and slavery.
Bring it back. Those were more populous times. I tell you what, The Simple Life.
I am picturing Kevin D. Williamson descending from the rafters upside down in like some Malaysian factory.
Well, like Spider-Man?
No, like a vampire, which is what he is. No, yeah, bring back the simple life. But
The simpleton life.
yeah. Either they will ignore the law or they will stop dealing with poorer and less transparent countries. So rather than buying shrimp from Southeast Asia, that retailer might place an order for salmon from Norway, where it is quite sure there's no slavery going on.
Yeah, that would be awful if we stopped dealing with poor countries.
Hold on
if we
a
stopped
minute.
massively exploiting. All right.
There's a terrible, terrible price to pay, though, right, Felix?
Right, no, so I'm not going to, like, this entire thing is written, it's very dry, like, Cohen he writes like an economics textbook, just a very dry, boring, style. But his main argument is that the global race to the bottom in labor prices that sometimes includes temporary slavery in supply chains is good, not only because it supposedly increases the wealth of these poorer nations where labor costs pennies, but it does the most important thing, the most important possible thing that we can do, which is lower costs for American consumers. Never mind that for shrimp, we're sending fucking shipping vessels halfway across or entirely across the world and back. As long as it costs 40 cents less per shrimp, it's worth
Felix, it is the leanest protein. What do you want us to do?
Yeah, no, there's no coastal area in America you can get shrimp from, or Mexico, or anywhere closer.
I mean, this is of a piece with a tendency in libertarian kind of right-wing economic discussions to set up this false choice for people. Like, you can either care about the poor and disadvantaged globally, or you can care about the poor and disadvantaged in the United States, but you can't do both. Because if you do something to alleviate poverty globally, it's going to raise prices for people in the United States.
Yeah,
and if you do something to undermine, if you want to protect poor people, you have to keep the Walmart open and shoveling out cheap schlock so they can afford to buy it. But that means that the poor globally have to suffer, and it's because we can't ever consider raising taxes on rich people and funding, kind of redistributing wealth. We can't, that's beyond the pale. So it sets up this competition between, a domestic underclass and the global underclass.
Yeah,
And
we're not going to give them decent lives or any democratic control of their workplace or, a more egalitarian economy. But the shrimp will be cheaper, and that's really what it means to be a free working class American.
Oh, it's the only vector of real freedom anybody has. That's why everyone's free. So many people are freaking out about being asked to curtail things like shopping and going out, because that is what it is to be free in America. It's the only thing it is to be free in America, and the lubricant for it is cheap fucking consumer products, and everybody else has to bend to that because we are the big gnashing mouth at the end of the global supply chain. And if we're not consuming everybody's surplus, the entire thing falls apart.
It's the most advanced form of this artificial imposition of scarcity, where if you're making this argument on a grand scale, because obviously there's enough for everybody. If we try, if you did even the most minor forms of redistribution, people would not have to go hungry. That's it's very straightforward. The math is not hard.
Too.
They could have shrimp. They could even have shrimp, and shrimp is delicious, man. But you have to do this elaborate ideological dance that you don't even recognize as ideology in Tyler Cowen's case, where you have to pretend that we have a shortage of resources in order to justify squeezing absolutely everybody for it. Because otherwise, if you're just oh no, there's enough here, then the entire argument is ridiculous on its face. It's ridiculous for a lot of reasons, but on an a priori level, the whole argument is ridiculous.
Right. Well, and then creating the conflict, we said earlier, it's completely absurd to say that the lowest tier of American workers, which is a shit ton of people, benefit from the exploitation of the third world. The exploitation of developing countries is literally what is used to screw over the most vulnerable American workers. Like, and I think it's really depressing how we, the broader kind of, I don't know, leftish, politically oriented people have totally lost sight of that since like the just total failure of like the anti-globalization movement, since that all just like shit out. Like nobody really has a sense of, it's like basically we lost the kind of the war with trade, and now the only people sort of talking about it are weird right-wing populists that aren't going to do anything about it at all, but will pay basic lip service to it about we're going to bring jobs back, and it worked. It worked.
I think one of the reasons that argument was given up on, and the left's position on trade in a lot of cases is sort of the left and left of center is in stasis in a lot of cases, is like, this article was interesting to me because it's incredibly ideological, but not quite in the way that Cowan thinks it is. The fundamental ideology of this free trade economics, which is incredible. It's you're a good person for buying these cheap goods from these exploited workers in these incredibly poor nations.
Charity.
Because
charity.
Right. Like Cowan says, oh, well, if we make it so that you can't take part in any supply chain that has even temporary slavery, it takes away Western capital and attention from these places. So like not only is it a fundamental right that shrimp should cost fucking $3 for a pound because you brought them in across the world, which is a completely sustainable thing we can do in perpetuity. You should feel like a good person because the act of buying that shrimp from someone in Thailand who's a temporary slave, it increases awareness of Thailand. It makes them rich. I
didn't know it was a Thailand. What?
Yeah.
It increases their wealth, so they won't be slaves, which is, always how slavery works.
Yeah. Well, that's the other part of it is there's this perpetual like, if we stop doing this, if we try to actually take steps to divest from bad countries or countries that engage in practices or companies that engage in practices that we find unfavorable, we'll lose our leverage to influence them to be better. But we never use the leverage anyway. And this is the leverage that you threaten to withdraw.
Part of the fucking supply chain is the leverage.
And then you get them to change. And it's like we can't ever exercise the leverage that we have, but we also, if we gave up that leverage, it would somehow be worse.
It's almost like we
to
benefit from the horrifying policies that were constructed to adapt to U.S. global hegemony.
My favorite thing about Tyler Cowen is that there's just absolutely no thought in his mind that a corporation would ever act in a way that's not blatantly psychopathic. That like the idea that you could create a series of incentive structures to get corporations to not rely on slave labor. Like that just would like given a choice in Tyler Cowen's mind, they're always going to go with the slaves if that's a possibility. Like that there is absolutely nothing you could do. There's no amount of opprobrium you could heap on them to make them be any other way. Like,
well, I mean, he in some ways he does have a point. He's like, well, they're not going to not use slaves. Like, and it's
the only thing that's going to stop them would be actual like legal and financial penalties for doing it. That's it.
Yeah, but he doesn't want that.
We have like far fewer. I mean, like we can do that domestically, and it being overseas and out of sight and out of mind, we can turn a blind eye to it. And also, like even if we were like, I don't care if that's slavery business. Like, it's not like we could do anything about it. So that's great. We can say, oh, our hands are tied.
That's totally true, though, what Patrick says about how, like, so yeah, if you're saying, no, it's no good to use actual legal mechanisms, then yeah, there needs to be some sort of, like, social cost for doing something like participate in fucking slavery. And his underlying assumption, which I think is valid, is, no, the profit-seeking maxim will mean that corporations will always seek slavery. And it's like, well, that means that you just made an argument why it must be abolished. Like there is no, that you yourself are saying this is a system that will only seek the most psychopathic and immoral outcome agreed upon by all. Like those, like don't get postmodern. We know what that means. Slavery is a good example. How is that in any way a defensible system?
Because if enough money is spent on a product that is built in part by slavery, you will raise awareness of it. People will put slavery ribbons on their car, and then before you know, someone will record a fuck slavery video, and before you know it, done. And Thailand is just as rich as America, and then we keep going to poorer nations until we find the mole people QAnon is looking for, and they are the permanent lowest cost labor on the supply chain.
I think you're onto something.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was Cohen, always interesting, always thought-provoking, but the mention of the GMU professor who went to Chile made me think of another Latin American nation that has experienced some George Mason-style reform, Bolivia. The Inez government has postponed the elections, citing concern of coronavirus, though I don't think that's completely the reason. Derek, could you talk a little bit about what's going on in Bolivia, both their response to the coronavirus and maybe a little wool they're pulling over everyone's eyes with this?
Yeah, so I mean, the Áñez government, Janine Áñez came to power last fall when, after a coup, I think we can all agree at this point it was a coup, forced Evo Morales out of office, forced him out of the country. Her mandate, if she had one, I mean, she really kind of seized power. There was no, it was later ratified by the Supreme Court, but there was no, formal constitutional process by which she became president. But she did become president. Now she's serving in this interim capacity with the goal, her entire reason for occupying the office is to get Bolivia to a general election and elect a legitimate government again. She has now postponed the election twice. It was supposed to happen in May, and then Bolivia went into lockdown over the pandemic. Then it was rescheduled for September. The ostensible reason why it's been postponed again is that Bolivian authorities suddenly found hundreds of dead bodies in Santa Cruz and La Paz that were, look, they all died of the coronavirus. I guess that means the outbreak is still bad. This seems very fishy to me, but okay. So now they've decided they can't possibly have a safe election on September 6th, and they've postponed it again until October 18th. The real issue, I think, is that polling indicates that the candidate for Morales' Movement for Socialism party, Luis Arce, is likely to win the election, or at least to finish first in a first round. He may not be able to avoid a runoff, but he seems to be the favorite to become the next president. And this is, of course, they just engineered this coup to get Morales and his party out of power. So there is a concern that I think that, they don't want to hold the election again and just kind of return MAS to power. Now, there was a letter that one of the real right-wing freaks who were involved in the coup, Fernando Camacho, wrote to OAS recently asking, and this was before the revelation of these dead bodies that we just discovered, and oh my God, we can't have an election. Prior to that, he wrote a letter. Camacho's running for president. He's not very popular. He's a pretty fringe right guy, but he was very prominent during the coup. He wrote a letter to the Organization of American States, which, if you recall, back last year, played a significant role in kind of building the case to oust Morales. Wrote a letter to the OAS asking the OAS to step in and do something to prevent this election from happening, citing, among other things, the idea that the election was just going to return MAS to power, and oh my God, we can't have that. So that was seems like a little bit of a mask off moment. But that's where things stand. There's now supposed to be an election on October 18th. I suspect it won't happen then either, and they'll try to push it off again. there is has been a substantial outbreak of the coronavirus in Bolivia. A lot of that seems to have been due to Áñez's government's incompetence, its failure to lock down properly, its decision to reopen too fast. So yeah, there's a lot of not great stuff happening, and doesn't seem like we're moving toward a resolution anytime soon.
Fuck. These notes are completely out of order. Sorry.
Mr. Bean is hosting today's episode of Chapo.
Can you talk briefly about the Áñez government it's accused dozens of elected MAS officials and social movement leaders of sedition charges. It's sort of like a Ergoncan light type deal. The perpetrators of the coup accusing everyone of coupping the government. Particularly Patricia Arce, mayor of Vinto, has been hit with those. But I've also seen that in response to the postponed election, that there are significant strikes, like a lot of labor movements promised a general strike. I haven't been able to see anything after the ultimatum. I know that the teachers are on strike over privatization, but that's a different thing. Is there any word on how the strikes are going, if they could pressure the government into holding elections or maybe just like not harass MAS officials with the show trials?
Yeah, I haven't seen much about this. There have been some strikes. There have been some demonstrations since the announcement that they were postponing the vote again. I haven't seen a move toward a general mass mobilization, but I think it's building to that. Mm-hmm. I've only seen kind of reports of a demonstration here. There was something in El Alto, I think, last week. I've seen, kind of reports of that. I think, I don't know if there's going to be anything bigger than that in the lead up to what's now supposed to be the October election. I do think this is it's building toward a crisis. It's building toward a breaking point. And if, as I suspect, they try to push it off again, like we get into early September and they're like, well, sorry, we can't, still not ready to hold an election. That's when I think things will really start to get combustible. Now, I could be totally wrong about that, and it could happen sooner, but I think it's probably, I don't know. I mean, maybe the third time's the charm or something like that, but I think that there is some frustration about the delay, but I don't see it getting really bad unless they try to do it again, which I think they will. So it will get bad.
Get bad how? Like, you mean full-blown civil war, or just...
No, I think you'll see a return to a lot of the stuff that happened right after Morales was ousted. You'll see protests, like more violent, kind of energetic protests that are countered with some heavy police and security violence on the part of the Áñez government. Again, that's a step on the road to the kind of thing you're talking about. I don't know that we're close to that yet, though.
All right. Well, good times ahead. Every Western press hit I've seen of this, by the way, is just completely straight. Áñez calls off election over coronavirus fears.
Yeah, I mean, sort of kind of swallowed the line from them that the pandemic. I mean, they can't have an election, obviously. There's been no kind of interrogation of that, much in the way that there was no real interrogation of all the evidence that's come out since Morales was forced from power to suggest strongly that this was an engineered coup and upending all of the media narrative that we saw when it happened. There's been very little kind of reflection about that in the press.
Oh, well.
And these are the same people who just have kittens every time they just imagine Trump even suggesting postponing the election. And then in Bolivia, they're like, what? They could do it. What do you want?
And this isn't even, I mean, I'm not going to defend Donald Trump, but the Agnes government is completely illegitimate at this point. There is no justification for her still being in office. She had one job when she kind of took over, which was to get Bolivia to a new election. And instead she's made, substantial changes to its foreign policy. She's been, putting down protests violently. She's been chasing MAS members around, threatening to throw them in prison. There's no justification for any of this. She really, there's no, I mean, had she, held an election and won, then you could say, okay, that's a legitimate government. But it's even worse, I think, in Bolivia's case, because there really is such a desperate need for an election as soon as possible to put a real government in place.
Well, there is some lighter news on the other side of the world. Matt mentioned Mr. Bean, and the most moral army in the world, they had a Mr. Bean moment. About a week ago in the Mount Dove area, Israel, they had first claimed that Hezbollah shot a Cornet missile at a Merkava tank. But what happened after, as they say in Upworthy videos, was, it will shock you. Israeli troops shot at each other because they were convinced that members of their unit, other responding units, were members of Hezbollah and completely freaked out. But Derek, can you talk a little bit about the tensions between Israel and Lebanon and Hezbollah right now? Because I did see that Israel is claiming that they will hold Lebanon accountable for Hezbollah hitting at them at all. But how much of this recent flare-up is just Israeli incompetence? How much of it is just them trying to sort of trump up this border threat for political reasons?
It seems to me to be mostly incompetence, and maybe kind of accidental, although I hesitate to use that word in this context. But the Israelis have been engaging in airstrikes, missile strikes, drone strikes in Syria pretty much at will for the last several years, always targeting Iranian forces in Syria or Iranian-backed militias in Syria. But they have been for at least a couple of years, it seems like. I mean, I don't know the extent of it, but because nobody will really talk about it. But they seem to be have been taking a more kind of kid gloves approach to Hezbollah fighters, and so there have been incidents like the Israelis doing a drone strike on a vehicle that was carrying Hezbollah fighters, where they did this kind of weird double tap with a warning shot first that gave the fighters time to stop the truck and get out, and then they bombed the truck. There was an Israeli drone strike in southern Beirut a few months ago that was meant to target Hezbollah, but it was done in such a way as to avoid causing any casualties. And I think the reason is, the Israelis want to destroy Hezbollah's war material, especially in Syria. They want to break any Iranian supply chain to Hezbollah, but they don't want to.
It might have, parts of it may have been produced by slave labor.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's obviously the reason. Yes, but they don't want to do something that forces an escalation, and part of the reason for that is the last time Israel and Hezbollah had a real confrontation in the mid-2000s, Israel didn't come off very well. And I think they would rather avoid a repeat of that. So they seem to be, they seem to have been trying to avoid causing casualties. But they carried out a strike, I think, a couple of weeks ago near Damascus, in which one Hezbollah fighter was killed. And this is where I said, I hesitate to call it an accident, because this is an intentional airstrike, an intentional missile strike, or whatever it was. But I feel pretty strongly that they didn't intend to catch a Hezbollah fighter in this strike. They probably were looking at another Iranian group or maybe some Iranian personnel. And this guy may have been in the wrong place at the wrong time from the Israeli perspective. But that immediately, of course, raises the issue of a counterstrike by Hezbollah, which sort of, has to do something. I mean, it would be detrimental to Hezbollah's, I think, image, reputation to just kind of let that go and not do anything. And this is where you get into sort of, scuttlebutt about, is there some kind of secret arrangement between the Israelis and Hezbollah to kind of leave each other alone for the most part? And of course, nobody can actually say that because it would discredit, they'd be embarrassed by it. And I don't, that's speculation, but it's one of the things that I've seen written about recently. So, this kind of forces, you anticipate some kind of response from Hezbollah. Hezbollah leaders have said, we will retaliate for this. But it's unclear, what form that retaliation is going to take. And I think Israel's been on a little bit of a high alert in the north. Neither party really wants a conflict right now, which is again kind of why I think this strike was not intended to kill any Hezbollah fighters. There's no upside. I mean, the Israeli government is awash in protests over Benjamin Netanyahu's corruption trial. It's struggling with the coronavirus because Netanyahu reopened the economy too fast, and they've seen a huge spike in cases. This isn't a great time for him to be starting a war because it's not clear that he has the full support of the Israeli public behind him. Hezbollah's in a similar boat. Lebanon is in complete implosion politically and economically, and Hezbollah has been trying for several years now to become more politically oriented. I mean, they still have obviously an armed wing, but they've really been trying to function more and more as a political party, which consequently means that they're suffering for the political chaos that's happening in Lebanon. And there've been anti-government protests going on since October, including protests against Hezbollah. And so they're in a position also where like any conflict between Israel and Hezbollah is going to pull the rest of Lebanon in. And so, before they get involved in something like that, Hezbollah leadership needs to be sure that the rest of Lebanon is going to actually follow them into the breach. And this isn't a situation where I think they can be confident of that. So I don't think either party here wants a full-blown war, but they may be on a sort of tit-for-tat kind of roller coaster for a while.
Yeah, I saw yesterday that Israel claimed they had stopped a 4-man cell from planting IEDs on the border. It was one of those sort of it looks like a Modern Warfare 2 montage video that the IDF account tweets out, but I don't know the veracity of that was in Golan.
It's hard to say. I mean, they claim some things. They don't claim some things that are obviously, Israeli attacks, and it's hard to go by what the IDF claims at this point.
One thing that I think has been kind of interesting about this is Israel made one of those shitty videos about Lebanon, and it actually got copyright striked, which was pretty. I guess DMCA is the only thing more powerful than any nation or any president because it's happened to Trump so many times, but. The new thing seems to be, well, they've done this with Iran for a few years, but I had not seen it with Lebanon before, which is Israel and America saying, "Whoa, you're experiencing brutal austerity, brutal poverty, hyperinflation, it's because all your money is going to fighting us." Which is, I mean, look, there's the fun gaslighting you do with your friends, and then there's this. For any American aligned, I thought it made me think a lot about Patrick, what you recently wrote about Imperial Wars coming home. Just any imperial any imperial power or like imperial proxy like Israel accusing anyone else of that.
Oh God, it's just like it's hilarious, especially because to speak to some of the stuff that Derek was talking about with Israel, like whenever you have anybody who's trying to be a hegemon, or whether it's a global hegemon or a regional hegemon, like your domestic and your foreign politics are intimately tied together to the extent that like if you have a regime that's on reasonably shaky ground internally, any sort of like you run the risk with any sort of foreign entanglement if it doesn't go the way that you want it to go, that you totally shoot your legitimacy at home too. So it makes sense that like you might have some sort of special arrangement with Hezbollah if you're afraid that if that goes even a little bit south, you're going to end up with people in the streets protesting you. And I don't know. I mean, I just think like we're in a weird time and a weird place given the US's position as a pretty obviously declining global hegemon. And so that does weird things with all of its proxies too overseas. And it's just like, it creates a global context where there's just a lot of weird stuff happening and a lot of points of friction and opportunities for stuff to happen. I mean, to put it broadly.
You talk about the periphery coming back into the empire. And I almost brought this up earlier with that just brilliant Galaxy Brain Cowan article. But the first thing I thought of when he said that was just like, oh, this is, if we talk about peripheries, the chicken's coming home to roost.
Yeah.
The guest worker program is just a perfect example of like, oh, okay, well, we figured out kind of like a free trade where we could like massively exploit people in developing countries. But what would be more efficient than doing that? Massively exploiting people from developing countries in our own country, eh? Hey, you don't have to like, it's kind of a DoorDash approach to it. Just bring them here. It's super convenient. I mean, it's everything. It's war, it's policing, it's trade. It's all just sort of saturating and bleeding into everything. And some of it's by design and some of it's an externality, but it's amazing.
Yeah, you just can't be an imperial power without there being domestic consequences of that, whether they're like literally material. Like it's just like when you see dudes on the streets of Portland or any other city wearing camo, holding M4s with optics on them, like you're just literally using the equipment that you've developed to fight imperial wars on the streets of American cities. So there's the material aspect of it, but then there's also like the series of attitudes that go along with having an empire and feeling the need to define and police the border. Like it's not just that like Border Patrol and DHS gets all of the really like gung ho like fucked up people out of the military. It's also that like when you task an internal security service with policing imperial boundaries, like you're gonna get sets of attitudes and like ideas about exclusion and inclusion and who gets to count as who that are going to blow back. I mean, I think that's like, like you're just creating the structural circumstances where that's inevitable.
I mean, I'm really still sort of like rolling around this idea in my head. But one of the things that also sort of occurred to me was that I wouldn't want people to look at something like Portland and come to the conclusion that that kind of repression is taking place because the people they're repressing are some kind of an actual legitimate threat to power. And I feel like the mistake that people make a lot of the times when this happens is to think, oh, well, they're cracking down on them because they're running scared from, these like leftist anarchists that pose a real threat. And it's like, come on, like use your head. Like we would never think that about any other country, about any other conflict in any other country. Like they don't start fights that they don't think they can win. First of all, they know that they're weak. It's not a testament to the threat of some kind of organized left. It's a testament to their weakness. We wouldn't, for example, say, oh, wow, look how ruthless the state of Israel is being to Palestinians. Wow, the Palestinians must really, really be a threat to them. Wow, they must really, they must really be challenging power and, be very close to sort of like a destabilizing kind of Israeli control over their territories. It's like, no, this is happening because we are very much on the back foot and because it's easy. It's easy. They're doing this stuff because they think they can get away with it, not because there's any kind of like, organized left that poses any real threat to, an increasingly authoritarian right coming from inside the house.
If you want to have an internal security service, a genuine, honest to God internal security service, you need to create the kinds of conditions that justify having one, right? Like you have to create the sets of images that you can use as a legitimation of your of that.
It sort of made me think of the thing John Dolan said about how militaries that are mainly used for internal security, specifically the IDF, how they start to falter after a few generations, how the way they're used becomes very evident when they're fighting against an enemy outside their own borders. I mean, specifically thinking of Israel in Lebanon 15 years ago, and how, those expensive Merkavas, everything, they just turned into fucking death traps. How they just end up shooting at each other out of sheer terror. I guess it's sort of a little bit of, I don't know, it's a little bit of the opposite thing in America, where we do have this military that in a conventional war, like, the first couple weeks of Iraq or Afghanistan, it does what it's supposed to do. It uses the trillions of dollars of technology and overwhelming manpower to roll over forces that it should roll over on a conventional battlefield. But it's slowly bled out and just bleeding money and blood like a stuck pig for generations, acting as an internal security service. So when the war comes home and the same technology, the same people in a lot of cases, as Pat brought up, are used for internal security, the only thing they can do is sort of do this thing that's actually quite similar to what Israel does militarily, what they've done in Syria in a lot of cases, which is just sort of like cherry pick these targets that they can look terrifying striking.
Yeah, like if you watch them, like if you watch those DHS guys or like whatever kind of mishmash of federal agencies or whoever these people are exactly, I mean, some combination of like 3 or 4 different federal agencies, right? Like if you watch them operate, you're not looking at like tactical geniuses here. Like these are not people who are like, these are not guys who are reading Thucydides or like are like, what do we really do if we get face to face in a phalanx? Like, how are we going to handle that? Like they're not watching for threats.
That's the most amazing thing about it, is that it's just like, there's nothing particular. Like they're not fucking, brown shirt militia. Like they're Paul Blart Portland soldier. Like it's really kind of deprofessionalized, I guess is the word. I don't really know how to describe it. It feels more slapdash. And I mean, some of that too, I think maybe has to do with sort of the general decline of like the military as sort of like a unified, why would anyone join the fucking military at this point? Like the number of, congratulations, here's your gun, you're on food stamps.
And also, there is the thing with like an expanding, a huge expansion in the number of federal police offices, like the DHS in the last couple decades has largely, expanded, and ICE and stuff. Like there of course in America is no limit to, hot dog neck psychos who would like to beat somebody up and not get in trouble for it, and in fact get praised. But there is a actual limit on the number of people like that who have other like attributes that you would want in an employee, like competence, basic intelligence, impulse control, weight in a manageable category. And there clearly is more demand for just people whose bottom line qualification is desire to carry out violence on behalf of the state than there is any underlying other standards, because from what I've heard, the DHS guys are like the guys who couldn't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And think about like our actual military, the way that functions as a purveyor of violence is A, increasingly automated via drone strikes, or B, outsourced to a very specific group of people who see a great deal of combat is like special ops guys who are going on tour after tour after tour after tour after tour and doing a lot of stuff. And then you have just kind of the mass of dudes. So if you're DHS and you're recruiting, and like you maintain recruiting offices at all the major military bases, like you're not getting the special ops guys because they can go on to a lucrative career in private security. You could work as a bodyguard. You could, I mean, if you're one of the Navy SEALs and you've got a knack for branding, you can become a leadership consultant. Like those are not the guys who are joining.
You could do epic Instagram shit with like a shirt where like Kelvin is pissing on a Quran.
Exactly.
And
it's
you
like
you sell coffee for a 500% markup that you got from Costco.
I mean, you've got your own
put a gun on
you've got
it.
your own CBD brand. Like that's how you know you've made it in the tactical Instagram world. But like those are not the dudes who are joining DHS and going and like hitting the 50-year-old disabled CB 3 times and failing to make a dent. Like that's like those are not like you're not getting the super scary like. That's
the thing. When I saw that video, I was like, I thought he was like a big husky teen. And I was like, oh man, yeah, he's probably like a high school football player. And then came on, yeah, he's like 54 years old.
No, that is a guy who like makes polite conversation in Home Depot, and they didn't move him an inch.
No.
Like,
I mean, he was, in fairness, he was a collegiate wrestler, and so those guys have a slightly different attitude toward pain.
Sure,
but at the same time,
he probably enjoyed that.
yeah, he's like he's watched Vision Quest one too many times, and so. But like, I mean, you've got a baton and you've got 2 hands on it, and you're really getting into it, and you can't move the guy. Like that's a you problem at that point.
Yeah. Maybe you could practice on a piñata.
Well, I mean, one thing I think has fascinated me about like the operator aesthetic that we've gotten in the past few years is operators sort of. I'm obsessed with SEALs. Like I have a like every few weeks I like just search for SEAL arrested because there's so many stories of like a Navy SEAL.
Are there any like adorable misunderstandings where they're like, oh no, this little SeaWorld guy wandered into a shopping mall?
Unfortunately, no. There aren't that many cute stories about, you know, the cute kind of SEAL getting a DUI or anything by accident. But the Navy SEALs love the uncute kind, you know, stealing $6,000 and then killing 3 guys to cover it up, going to prison forever. But I think it's interesting because they replaced the James Jesus Angletons, the Frank Carlucci's, people like that, the sort of old network of Ivy League spies that would, you know, embezzle millions of dollars and go to Libya or show up at literally every assassination of the middle part of the 20th century. And those old guys, the Carlucci's, the Angletons, the Wilsons, they represented their era in that they were part of this, you know, so they were part of this social network. They exemplified sort of like post-war social bonds and the marriage of old American families and sort of like new post-war striver types. And they used both sort of like America's incredible economic might at the time and also constantly misused this technology to try and kill Castro with exploding underwear and shit like that. But the new guys, their replacements, the operators, they're interesting to me because they're lionized in a way that these previous guys weren't. And they're also, their main thing seems to be like they will kill anyone at any time for any reason. That's the thing that is lionizing it. And
I think that this isn't the idea that they're like kind of like cowboys or you know, or like samurai that like don't have a feudal lord. They're like free. Like it's kind of the myth of like a gun for hire, which Americans sort of love.
I'm curious as to, I want to bounce something off y'all. I'm curious as to what you think of this. Is like that there's a particular way in which operator culture and like the tactical stuff that you see especially on Instagram, that like it's a weird outgrowth of a particular kind of bro culture. So like bro culture is deeply intertwined with it, which means that there are some deep insecurities intertwined with it. And some like, there's just some weird psychological stuff going on that I don't know if would have been there a couple of decades ago. I have a theory that was actually
cultivated by those institutions and brought in, because like they needed they meaning whatever, that the state apparatuses that now benefit from sort of outsourcing the military to less accountable kind of organizations. They needed this to look appealing in some way. I mean, like, I have no idea, but I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me. Like, if you think about it, that lacks all the dignity and respect in the things that, like, your relationship to civil service, all of the things that people sort of like that I think come from a noble place about the idea of the military, you know, insofar as it has ever, even for a moment, represented that. Like the operator thing, if you were to, like, 20 years ago, you know, pitch that to some, you know, farm boy who was like, you know, I want to serve my country, you know, I want to have a sense of purpose, because he's 18 and dumb and doesn't know what the military actually does. But it, you know, it occupies this myth. And they're like, well, what if you did this instead? Who'd be like, what the fuck is that? So I think it's my theory that the bro thing is totally astroturfed in by the state in order to make this like, okay, well, you don't get the kind of dignity and respect that we generally associate with the military, but you get to be a fucking cool, badass cowboy.
No, I agree with that. I think it's a modern invention and like a modern effort by the state, because it's the only way they can make a military career seem individualistic in a way that will appeal to a certain type of young person.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they're replacing the thing that Amber's talking about, like the thing about purpose and the dignity of serving your country, like that. The sales pitch there is like you're part of a team, but the whole pitch of the operators is that they're special. They're tier 1. They're the elite, and that means you have to create an entire specific culture around that to make it, yes, attractive in an individualistic way. And that reflects the shift of like the social order towards like towards a point where people can't even really like metabolize any kind of pitch to them that is not on the level of this will make you cool, this will make your life better, because social like values have sort of been suffused out of the public space.
Yeah, I mean the way that they made, like, they marketed being the tip of the imperial spear for Americans, 50, 60 years ago, or just the Western spear, was like, spy movies. They changed spies, like the actual guys, the Wilsons and the Angletons, who were just like dour Mormons and other types of freaks who just sort of wordlessly shuffled around the globe, jacking off in the corner while they executed Patrice Lumumba and embezzling money. They made them into like these cool guys who have sick gadgets and get laid and always say the correct, cool, funny thing. And yeah, similarly for these guys who I think, what do you think an actual operator is like? Someone who has killed countless people and just deadened things inside that make you human. They're probably incredibly fucked up, volatile, and live kind of joyless lives. But yeah, to market that, you have to make it so that, they're the only Ronin, they're the only individuals left in this country. I always think about that. Did you ever see that Navy commercial where it's like, do you want to be buying a minivan for your fat family, or would you like to be a SEAL? It's like, it's one of the most ideological things I've ever seen. And it's like, I'd rather be with my family.
Like, but those are the two genders. Those are the two genders in late imperial America. Is you either get to be a fat slob with a minivan, like you get to be broadcasting from your shitter, as I am at the moment, or you get to be a Navy SEAL. That's what you like. That's what you get. All I could think about as we were having this conversation about the operators is the dudes with the hatchets. Like, that's what you become. You become the dudes who are getting issued the tactical hatchet to kill unarmed people. Like, that's
But like the crazy 88, like I don't actually like.
Yeah, no. There was a group.
I missed the hatchet part.
Oh, you did? Okay. Oh, I thought everybody knew the hatchet part. No, there was a one team of Navy SEALs. They decided their thing was going to be that they had hatchets. They had like tactical hatchets, and that they were going to use those to. That they were going to use those to kill people.
Kill Bill.
It was like 2007, so it was in the immediate after. It was in the Kill Bill era. No, that's like it's entirely plausible. Yeah. So, but like that's how you end up with the guys with hatchets. The only like Navy SEAL that I ever met in person was a former Olympic swimmer who was the dumbest motherfucker I ever knew. Like he was like he could barely make it through a school that was designed to get him through it on an athletic scholarship. Like and that now he's a businessman. He's a successful businessman.
Fish brain.
Yeah.
He knows the business secrets of Jesse Ventura and all the operators.
Yeah, look, man, like I can watch
Jocko Willenick.
I can watch a Jocko video and enjoy it a great deal. I watched a 16-minute video of him talking to one of his buddies about squats. Just like, do you just fucking get after it or don't you? Do you do it or don't? Like? And I love that. I'm a proud bro. I could watch that all day. But I think if you're building the tip of your imperial spear out of those dudes, you're going to end up you inevitably end up in the hatchet place.
I think too. Like it's not just that you're building your imperial spear out of those dudes; it's that you're building those dudes.
I think there's an element of this that it's becoming harder and harder to pretend that the wars that we wage are somehow in defense of something and are not just purely imperialist offensive conflicts. Like 40 or 50 years ago during the Cold War, you could pitch somebody, join the military, and like you're defending the country. There's a threat. We're under threat. Even as recently as 9/11, you could make that appeal. It was absurd, but these 20 guys flew planes into, okay, we're under threat. It's an existential threat. We're gonna, we're all in mortal danger. Defend the country. There's no pitch for that anymore, and yet here we are in 8 countries fighting variations of a video game conflict that have no basis in defending anything, and your pitch, I think, has to be something else. Like that you can do this and it'll be cool. Like you'll get to go crack some skulls if that appeals to you, or you get to go like do extreme sports shit. Whatever it is, like whatever appeals to you on a sort of personal level, because there's no motivation anymore for do you want to defend your country? Do you want to defend your family? That's absurd. There's no conflict like that happening, and it hasn't been for a long time. But we've run out. Like we can't even pretend anymore that there's something like that. That there's a component of that goes into to serving.
And it shows that they're like enlistment numbers, because you had like, again, Cold War stuff. It was also sort of coercive, right? And so was like the post 9/11 stuff, because you could be like, well, what, you don't want to protect us? It's really dangerous. There's foreign threats. Right. There's threats abroad. And now they're like, do you want to protect your country? Like the, whatever 18-year-old farm boy that they were pulling from to the, whatever. That's a cliche. There are no farms left. But like he would be like, from who? Like, who are I fucking, like, it doesn't work at all. Like, China, like, I'm keeping my eyes on my own paper right now. They seem to be doing well, but I don't care. This isn't a salutatory and is fine economically. That's not appealing to the sort of people who they used to pull from to get to join the military. Like, it's just, the conflict isn't justifiable.
One of the real ironies of it is that, like, the real reason to join the military is that you're joining one of the few functioning civil institutions in the United States, and the thing that most closely resembles the kind of like supportive state systems that existed in this country, like in the post-World War II era. But that's not a pitch that works on 18-year-olds. Like that's a pitch that works on 35-year-olds who have 2 kids. Like that, join this and you're going to have great insurance. You're going to get a pension. You're going to have job training. You're going to be set up for a wonderful life afterwards. Here's some money to go to college. That's stuff that works on people who have a stake already. Like that would be your real pitch, but that doesn't work on like a 17-year-old convenience store clerk who's looking to get out of like Odessa,
Sure. And they're not, I think also they figured out that like the what used to be sort of a mini welfare state in the military is just pretty much gone. Mm-hmm. So I think, like, if you have any experience, if you come from a military family or whatever, it's just like, well, they're all on fucking food stamps. Like, what am I even getting out of this? Yeah. Like, it's just such an obviously raw deal. I mean, you know, good, but like, no wonder like 18-year-olds are like, yeah, I'm not fucking doing that. Fuck that shit.
And so yeah, it ends up being all of this stuff we talked about, like, ends up coming back together, right? Because you have fewer and fewer people that you're recruiting to do the actual fighting. Which works because you have fewer and fewer of them to start with, and you're either doing war by automation or you're doing war with the operators. Like, those are your two options.
Something that I've always found interesting is both parties' obsession with drafting veterans to run for office since 9/11, and the increasing diminished returns they seem to get out of that. Like, when a veteran wins, it seems to be incidental. Like, it's either like it's in a safe blue or red seat. There are other things about the candidate that are attractive. But how many candidates, especially by Democrats, have been selected just because of the military background? And I think, you know, like Derek said, there's this subconscious realization among all Americans that none of our wars are heroic or even really have any point to them. Mm-hmm. And there's just like a rejection. Like, even though the military polls high, people's opinion of the military polls high, there's still this subconscious rejection of it as this heroic path, or just everyone deserving of this special adulation thrust upon them. I mean, the people that actually get that are sports figures. Mm-hmm. That's who's going to replace veterans in office. That's the only thing Americans actually find heroic or know anything about.
It's President The Rock in 2024. Yeah. Like, that's like, I don't even think I'm joking. Like, I actually think if he ran for president, he would win in 2024. But
absolutely.
I don't know. It makes me wonder, because I've spent a lot of time working on the Roman Empire over the years, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about like Roman frontiers and barbarians and the Roman army. Like, did the Roman army have like, I mean, the evidence isn't good enough to really be able to say for sure, but did the Roman army just have like the dudes who went out and did the actual killing and then a bunch of guys who worked desk jobs? Like, I think they kind of did. And so I wonder, like, the extent to which the collapse of the Roman Empire then has a lot to do with the guys who did the actual killing, deciding that they were going to be the ones who ought to have some stake and have some say. And like, what does that say for our future? I guess. I don't know. It's like, because like the frontiers of the Roman Empire was where they actually recruited the soldiers toward the end. Like, they recruited them mostly from the other side of the border. So, and like, to the extent that there's no real difference, like which side of the frontier that you were living on, it's basically the same culture and the same people, and lots of people are going back and forth. And like, you know, if you were born on the Roman side of the border, well, your family probably came from a village 2 days ride further the other direction, right? And so as the Roman Empire falls apart, it's just these people who are on the frontier, who may or may not have been in the Roman army at some point or another, like picking up stakes and moving to the interior as an organized army. And so then that just becomes theirs. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that, but it does make me wonder, like, in this age of a professionalized military that increasingly has a very specific group of people who do the actual fighting, like, where does that leave us? I don't know. I don't know that I have an answer, but
well, maybe you get your alderman or city councilman, they're a former member of the Taliban. that would be very exciting. I would love that. That's like, look, man, Sharia now. That's,
yeah. You know what? Like, I don't support, like, you know, their adventures abroad, but like, you have to respect the troops. You know, like, this was a service member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, like, to what extent, like, how long did the ideological afterglow of the 50-year anniversary of World War II stuff last? So, like, if that's the lens through which we view Saving Private Ryan and, like, Band of Brothers and all that stuff, and, like, that carried us through the early years of the War on Terror and the war in Iraq, like, at what point did that officially wear off? Was there, like,
2007.
2007?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Because 2007, 2008, that was the end of the bargain. And like the basic bargain of America is that you suffer all these awful indignities and just cruel shots of luck. You can really just lose the lottery and everything can be fucking ruined, because you can have this standard of living and culture that you think is above anywhere else you could be born, even though there are a lot of other industrialized nations where there's a similar standard of living, even if a lot of the cases these European nations don't happen to believe in air conditioning like we do. But I think 2007, where the way that we had to expand credit and all these things that allowed everyone to be a homeowner, that the skimming off the top, it started to come back on people when people had these subprime mortgages that started to just collapse under them, when properties started to go underwater. That's when the basic post-war bargain, that was the end of it. And I think once that basic bargain and that standard of living couldn't be guaranteed anymore to, like, I guess very broadly middle-class people, that's when the prestige wore off. And I mean, stuff from that time period is incredibly interesting to me because it's the last dance. Like, up until that, like those last that first, I'd say 3 years after Bush's reelection, it's an amazing cultural snapshot from any given day, where it's like, you wake up in your mansion that was built 2 years ago, that's 4,500 square feet and has a hot tub with neon lights in it that you paid $370,000 for, that for, a mortgage that can go to 33% APR.
Yeah.
But you've been paying $700 a month for it because the interest hasn't kicked in yet. And you're like, the only way it's going is up. Only way. You drive to work in your fucking Chrysler 300, and your wife, with her LG chocolate, sends you a picture of like some shitty fucking Rachel Ray red velvet cake, because that's all everyone ate back then. And it was just, no one really knew. It was all going to come crashing down, and all that imperial prestige and that post-war glow that you mentioned it was on its last legs. But yeah, no, I would say that's it.
Yeah, I think people were uneasy, like, prior. Like, I remember being like, I have to take out how much money just to go to like an urban satellite campus? That doesn't seem sustainable. But I mean, like, they say that's the thing I need to do to get a job, so I'll do it, I guess. And, well, people are buying houses. Like, people I know who don't make a lot of money. I'm like, so, it seems kind of, but I think everyone I knew who was either like a first generation college attendee or, came from a low income background was just like, I'm a little nervous about what's going to happen when I graduate. And then, I graduated in 2008. I was like, I fucking knew it. And the whole time there was, of course, like this subtext of our total inability to sort of reel in American empire, which was the last great sort of political battle that, like, we had on the left. It was like, I feel like we're not in charge of anything, and this might not actually be what we were promised, because there seems to be a pattern of that going on since, 9/11. And then, the last, I think Felix is right. I think, like, the last moment when we thought, well, but, maybe it'll be okay, was just before, like, the financial collapse. And they were like, shit, I knew it. I fucking knew it.
Yeah. And that financial collapse is so interesting to me, specifically because everything that caused it was people who knew the jig was up trying to squeeze the last bits of water from the stone.
It's a fire sale.
Like, it was like, why would you package and issue subprime mortgages? Why would you overbuild like people did? Why would you do any of this unless you knew, time is up soon? There's this sort of last breath of some type of middle class in America. One last thing I can do to squeeze them, and it's to tell them that they can become rich by buying some fucking monstrosity that was built in 2004 and has 7.5 bedrooms.
No, it's literally insane.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's as good a note to end it on. I mean, I think that Biden, if he's running on anything, I feel like he's running on Red Velvet Cake, McMansion, like just that feeling like it's 2005 forever again. But we'll see. I think
He's running the Make America Great Again campaign.
Oh yeah,
He really
no,
actually is. Yeah.
100%, 100,000%. I mean, I think it's all going to look really funny after that first term because, like, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube for all this.
I don't know how he got my email, but I am really enjoying. Have you guys been getting emails from Biden campaign?
Oh no, what are they like? What are we working with here?
Oh my God, they're marvelous. My favorite one, I can't remember all of them. I mean, like, his team are very, I can't figure out who his fucking team are. Like, it definitely doesn't have a millennial kind of bend to it, which I kind of appreciated. I'm slightly disgusted by reading political messaging from NGOs and candidates that sound like, a Subway ad for Spanx. But like,
I hate that shit.
I hate it so much. It's disgusting. But Biden, I remember one that he said in the subject line was, "I hate having to do this," which just sounds like he's taking off his belt to beat you. Like, this hurts me more than it hurts you. But they're really weird. They're weird old man emails. They actually do, unlike most of these kind of email blasts, sort of capture his essence.
Yeah. I've seen some of them, and it's like, yeah, it reminds me of the emails my 100-year-old grandmother sends that are like, it's like half of a copy paste of an article that she was reading, and then like tried to send the article, couldn't, bye, love you.
That's adorable.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
And you know what? I'm proud of her for trying.
That's the vibe of the Biden campaign, though. We're proud of you for trying. We're proud of you that you're gonna sit in a basement and say as little as possible.
Yeah. You know what? He had a good day. He got out today. He had a walk. He got some frozen yogurt. He talked with his friend on the park bench. It was a really good day for him.
I really want him to at least do one of these emails where he goes, "Listen here, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that." That's the whole email. It's not sorry. I'm
in the same email, and then he still pressed send.
Sucks.
Yeah.
Shucks.
I love it when he says, "I shouldn't have said that."
That's the best.
No, like, that's how you know he's, because like no one in public life ever says that immediately after
an
saying
insane
something.
undermining of your authority. You're running for president, and you can't even guarantee that you're going to be able to get a sentence out and have any confidence halfway through it.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
What does it say though? That like you could spin that positively. In comparison, you could be like, that shows
at least he admits he's wrong.
Yeah, that shows a modicum of self-awareness. Like,
what I said before is, like, the personal appeal of Biden is that he is definitely a real person. He is not polished.
It's a battle between two ways of getting old and demented. You either deny it furiously and insist that your brain is as sharp as ever, like Donald Trump, or you just sort of slowly realize, oh no, everything's getting a little darker. Oh boy. And that's Joe Biden. And he's leveling with you. And then there's something appealing about, at least he's being honest about his clear mental decline, and that therefore he also is fully aware of our national decline, which seems like it would be a more soothing way to go than the raging against the dying of the light Trump's going to do. Like, no, we'll go war with China just to like go out in glory. It's like, why don't we just do like Edward G. Robinson and Soylent Green and just go with Uncle Joe into the room and watch the nice video of the plants and the trees, and maybe some old sitcoms, maybe like an old episode of Mad About You, and then you just slowly get euthanized. Well, I'm sorry. Jeez. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
I guess that is, well, that's like close it out. I guess like that's my theory of Biden and culture, that the 4 years under Biden, they're going to be so culturally wonderful because, like our president, we're going to be having the dying memories of our life. Like, we're going to have, like, G4 will be back on TV. Like, all the, literally, it's coming back. Like, all
the child soldiers will wear snap bracelets.
All these, like, weird specific things we remember from our childhood and adolescence will flow through us. as we're just bleeding out and the last burst of DMT is going through our brain, we'll be like, oh, hey, I remember that. I remember that. Like it's all, yeah.
Brass bathroom fixtures are going to be back in. That's how you know.
So the one Biden term we get will be him just doing a Family Guy, hey, do you remember montage to the rest of us as we slowly asphyxiate because there's been a nationwide gas leak that hasn't been repaired for the last 50 years.
Yeah. And then, the child will put down the snow globe and America ends and we realize it's been Turkey all along. Oh, we didn't actually get a chance to talk about Turkey. We are at 1:30. I don't want to keep you for super long.
We can cut some, but yeah.
I ran into some Mr. Bean trouble with my notes in the middle. We pulled back the yoke.
So let's do the plug.
Patrick and Derek, thank you so much for doing this. Is there anything that you guys want to plug as we close out?
Well, we have a new collaborative Substack effort going on. It involves Patrick and myself and a number of other people sort of on the left of the political spectrum who don't just cover politics. There's a wide variety of things. It's called Discontents. You can find it at discontents.substack.com. And it's right now it's a weekly newsletter. We've all got our own things going on at Substack. It's sort of a way to kind of bundle that together, and you can check in, see what we've all been working on. It's not like I know that there's a trend now to kind of recreate the publication through these outlets like Substack and have a bunch of people like writing under the same kind of masthead. It's not that. We're all still doing our own individual stuff, but we're kind of trying to put together a more communal kind of collective structure on top of that. I don't know, Patrick, you can
I mean, I think
say more.
It's a really it's a really good group of writers. If you like kind of left perspectives on everything from movies and TV to, like, I'm writing about the Ice Age right now. I'm literally writing about Pleistocene megafauna. If you like that, or if you're into stuff on immigration, if you're public defense, if you're into thoughts on empire, general cultural malaise, like there's somebody doing stuff like that in Discontents. So if you're looking to be exposed to some new and interesting writing, this is a great place to find it.
And you will be producing all of this content from the toilet.
All of it, yes, every day.
Okay.
That's correct.
That's the Patrick Wyman promise.
Hey, where else do you guys do your thinking?
That's why you have to get the 33% mortgage to get the place with 9 bathrooms. That's where you come up with the most ideas. No, we'll have the link to that in the show description, as well as individual newsletters and everything. I cannot recommend that enough. I mean, Derek I think still holds the record for returning guest on this show.
I think Brendan
he doesn't count.
Me, actually. Oh, okay, all right. If he doesn't count, then that's cool.
In any way.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we talked about this. I had him and Noah on a couple of weeks ago to talk about Blowback, and we were like comparing, like looking at the Wikipedia page.
Don't listen to him. How dare he? How fucking dare he act like that counts?
No, come on. Yeah, if that counts, then like any like ours count. Like, come on.
Yeah, ridiculous.
And I've known Patrick for like fucking like 8 years now.
Yeah, when the first time that you and I met, I had never been exposed to like weird Twitter or left Twitter at all, and so you listed yourself as the Breitbart Sports columnist.
Yes, that's a deep cut.
And I did not know if that was serious or not. It took me like a solid 2 weeks to figure out that was a bit. I had no idea. That was like 8 or 9 years ago.
Yeah,
that is so old school.
Such a fucking long time.
That was Swarthy Villain era.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I went like 6 months with my Twitter bio reading associate professor of Assyriology at Prager University. And you would not believe the number of people who actually thought I worked at Prager and ridiculed me for that.
Well, that's what you get for lying. I don't really have any sympathy.
The second time I got suspended was because I said I was Mark Kirk's press secretary. Like, you can't do that anymore. It sucks. But no, I mean, like, two of my absolute favorite writers, both on historical topics and contemporary ones. I cannot recommend it enough. Like, I've been reading both of you guys for very fucking long, like 7, 8, 9 years, and I cannot recommend it enough to people. So thank you guys so much for coming on. Guess we'll have this up later tonight.
Thank you so much.
Also, just at the very end here, just wanted to give a shout out to the workers at the Bath Iron Works in Maine who are currently carrying out the longest strike in America. This is the 7th week that they're entering, and just they wanted to get people aware that there's a strike fund, which we'll put a link to in the show description.
All right. We will see you guys in the middle of the week where we will provide you the minutes from Will Menaker's trial and execution. Thank you, and see you soon.
There's some shocking fucking cameos there.
Jacques Hughes.
Orville Redenbacher, you're actually still alive? What? And you've been You're Q? Oh my God.
JFK Jr. presiding over the tribunal. It's just insane.
All right. Thanks, guys.